Hello there! In this lesson we'll be using traditional oils and mediums to paint this silver Brumby. But before we get into it, if you love art, then don't forget to log on to our website at www.montmart.net, as we have hundreds of free art lessons there, as well as links to our Facebook and Instagram pages and to our art club, The Creative Connection. So let's paint a Brumby. For this project, I'm using a 90 by 120 centimetre canvas, and I start by drawing up the horse and background with a HB pencil. I won't go into detail on the drawing, but in the PDF that can be downloaded from our website, you can print out this outline and transfer it as best you can. Once you're happy with the drawing, squeeze out some raw sienna and dilute it with some refined linseed oil. I apply it with a 75mm Taklon artist brush and cover the entire surface of the canvas. The initial tinting of the canvas is a really important step, and the resulting tones applied on top of this ground gain much depth and dimension. It also allows the artist to get a true read of colour placed on the tint. Most colours will appear darker when painted on a white surface. For brushes, I'm using the oil colour brush set. I squeeze out some umber and titanium white, mix it and adjust the mix with amber gel. This medium has the viscosity of, say, thickened cream, so imparts translucence without overly diluting the paint. I then paint the tree stumps in the distance. Much of these will be covered in later steps, but they need to be down first. Next, I add more titanium white, some cobalt blue and a touch of mauve to the brown mix and paint in the foliage. I use the filbert to lay this in. The filbert is a flat brush, but the filaments are trimmed to a convex tip. This allows for roundish marks to be created free of hard angled edges, which make it perfect for painting organic subjects. They were the brush of choice for impressionists and ideal for the painterly effect I'm going for. This glade of trees in the background should look soft and out of focus to evoke an ethereal quality to the viewer. I soften it by dragging a clean, dry brush over the surface. I then create a whitish tone with titanium white and a touch of lemon yellow and adjust it with amber gel medium. I then lay this into the sky area and paint it in between the foliage to suggest the light peeking through in parts. The sky in winter has a delicate infused glow and is stark and bright. This method of painting the negative area into the positive foliage is an old impressionist's trick. It's not only quick to create, but creates an appreciable and pleasing pattern. It is just as important to create interest within a subject as it is to create realism. When doing this, it's important to continually keep stepping back to view your work from a distance and to not make the shapes consistent or sameish. Allow some of the matte ground show through too, as this gives the work unity. To underpaint the foreground, I add a touch of crimson red to some white and paint this into the lower portion of the work. Keep the coat fairly thin, allow that ground to show through in parts. This will be overpainted, but some colour is needed to provide a subtle tone from beneath. Our scene depicts snow and will be white, but snow is never true white and should be thought of as tinted greys of varying strengths. But we'll go more into that later on in the project. The shadow can be created with cobalt blue, titanium white, Payne's grey and mauve. I add some sap green into the mix and scrub it into the remaining negative space around my horse. In the underpainting stage, sometimes one can become underwhelmed with the dirty tones created, but it is a crucial part of building the piece. Now for the horse. Regarding colours, we use titanium white, Mars black and a touch of burnt umber. Now, although this movie is sped up, I have left most of the fundamental footage in. If you refer to the second image in the PDF, you will find a tonal guide to follow. By watching this a few times, you can see at how to balance the tones out. It takes a little practice, but pretty soon you will get the hang of mixing tones directly on the canvas. You will work out how to lay in the tones and strengthen them if they need them. to quickly work around the canvas and to suggest shadows and to highlight areas. The rule of thumb is to block in the main tones and then create subtle transitions between tones with a cleanish brush. On cleaning your brush, it's best to wipe off the colour rather than continually keep washing it out in turbs. Keep the coats thin, as it's much easier to blend thin passages of colour than thicker applications. Remember as well that oil paint possesses amazing tinting strength, so light colours can be laid into darker tones. The nature of the emulsion causes the tones to blend almost instantaneously, and because it has such a slow curing rate, you're not rushed and don't have to compromise the effect you're after due to it drying in. The colours are rich and complex, and it's easy to create transitions. If you do make an area too dark, it's a simple job to neatly remove it with a clean soft rag and reapply the correct tone. I've spoken to lots of folk who are reluctant to take up traditional oil paint due to the perception that they are tricky to use, or you need a large skill set and a comprehensive array of techniques to paint with it. The skills and techniques will come with a little practice and research. The first thing people realise is how they just seem to do what you want them to do. I honestly think they're the easiest art paint to use. Another important tip is to know when to stop with a blend. You might, for example, want to suggest some risen veins like under the eye here. So you lay in some pure white and soften the tone by dragging a brush gently over the colour, thereby darkening it and amalgamating it with the surrounding colour. Of course, you have to stop before the white disappears, or you have to start again. It is a good practice to lay in the rough middle tones and then darken or lighten as need be. Another tip is, if the brush is charged with a tone and you have laid it into the desired area, have a look around the work for another area that has that similar tone. Working around the piece sporadically enables the artist to create more uniformity between all the tones. Obviously, the light source is of great importance also. In this case, the light is emitting from behind and to the right, so the left of the face and the underside would be in shadow, and the top and right of the horse flooded with light. Horses are full of compound curves, so tonal transitions tend to be quite gradual. Horses also have very short coats, so muscles and bone structure are pronounced. Well, hopefully you're enjoying the project so far. You're still with us, so that's a good thing. The horse has been undercoated and we'll be glazing her a little bit later, but now we can move on to the foreground, so let's get that on. To top coat the snow-covered foreground, we'll be applying a number of greys made from sap green, crimson, cobalt, raw sienna, Payne's grey, titanium white and zinc white. I tint the zinc white with a touch of crimson and scrub it into the lower portion. Ensure the tone is whiter than the underlying colour. I then tint some zinc white with green, crimson and Payne's grey and paint in the middle ground. I paint pure titanium white into the top portion of the middle ground and blend it into the grey below. Ensure that the transition is smooth, as this gives a better sense of depth to the background. Use the fine number 4 round and bring the white into the tail. Keep the end of the stroke sharp. Once the tail has been cut in, work across the canvas and darken the grey as you go. It seems unnatural to think of snow in terms of grey, but overly white snow can look contrived and unrealistic. I think grey is a very underrated colour in paintings too. Pablo Picasso had a love for grey and created amazing work in monotones, and argued colour was secondary in painting. And in Michelangelo's eyes, his rival Venetian painters were brainless colourists, purveyors of gaudy eye candy. Both of them did do many striking works in colour also, and I suppose if you take anything from them, it would be that to rely on colour alone is limiting. I blend a light grey into the mid-grey in the middle ground and then lay pure titanium into the top portion of the middle ground and blend it smoothly in. Once the middle ground is laid in, I dip the large filbert into some refined linseed medium and lightly take the white into the trees. I add more oil into the coat as I work up the canvas to further thin the white coat. This suggests a smoky fog rising in the distance and adds an ethereal quality. I then mix up a dirty colour from cerulean blue, zinc white, Payne's grey and mauve and scrub it into the shadow areas. Areas of shadow will always show as cool tones. To suggest a bit of movement, I add some pure titanium white where the hooves are kicking up the powdery snow with the filbert. This needs to look soft and airy. When suggesting smoke, dust and fog, build up the tone slowly because it's difficult to remove it and reapply it. Lay down the soft tone first and build up stronger tone on top. This way the mass has body. I find it helps to hold the brush like a maestro's baton. This way only the flat part of the brush comes into contact with the canvas. You can then add the stronger white applications. These are being caught in the light and will show brighter. Next, I use an old brush to flick some titanium white over the mass. This creates thousands of tiny little speckles. For the glazing, we'll be needing some dippers. These clip onto the side of the palette. They have screw-on lids so you can keep your mediums from going off. In this case, we'll be using safflower oil. I squeeze out a touch of burnt umber, raw sienna and ultramarine blue. To create the glaze, you dip a clean brush into the safflower oil, take a tiny bit of colour and lay it over the chosen area. The rule of thumb is to lay sienna onto the highlight areas, umber into the mid-tone areas and ultramarine blue into any shadow areas. A glaze gives a real depth, realism and warmth to a piece, and although it's an extra step, it's definitely worth it, I think. Glazes work because of light refraction, as it bounces off the underpainting back to the viewer. Some of the Renaissance painters used many layers on their paintings, and that's why they had such a glow about them. Safflower oil medium is currently considered the best medium to use for final glazing, as it cures so hard. It also doesn't yellow over time as much as linseed oil or walnut oil, and doesn't wrinkle the paint film because it doesn't skin over like other oils. I glaze some ultramarine into the eye and then lay a thin layer of umber over the mane. So I've done half of the horse here, and hopefully the camera shows up the warmth that's been added with that glaze. So let's keep going and do the other half of the horse. As well as adding the glow, glazes also give the artist the option of changing the final colour of a subject. It's a really great technique to experiment with, and experimentation is pretty important for the personal evolution of an artist. Another favourite step for me, although it's small, is the highlight spot in the eye. A little pink around our friend's muzzle and voila! Well, thanks for watching. We hope you picked up something, and don't forget you can share your creative projects on social media using #MontmartreArt. We look forward to seeing some of your creations, and we'll see you next time.